we've created all these categories of things that take away human agency. We've like, for example, we take, you are responsible for being fat or being an addict or, or being lazy. All of these things have syndromes and sicknesses, and they're no longer deemed to be things that people have personal agency over or responsibility to.
I coach a soccer team of 12-year-old boys. It's rare to have a practice where a few of them don't arrive late. But with my boys having limited influence over when they arrive, not being the ones actually driving the car, I've had to ask myself if I can hold them accountable for when they arrive at practice. We've taken it as an opportunity to learn about responsibility. And this week's conversation reminded me why that is such an important thing for them to understand. Welcome to Work is Good, a podcast where we aim to help people enjoy and excel at their work. We do this by having conversations about the beliefs, qualities, and habits that make that possible. We also start every episode with a brief housing market update and a mortgage question of the week. My name is Landon with Cleveland Street Mortgage, and I host this show with my dad, Chris Butow, the owner and president at CSM. Please enjoy this week's episode.
All right, Ed.
Hey.
Thanks for joining me again.
Yeah, thanks for doing this.
Yeah. So this week, our topic is responsibility, just taking responsibility, and what that means, what the value of it is, and just kind of a little bit talking about different areas of where that might show up. But I will start with letting you give us a quick housing market update. What's going on this week? Anything new?
Yeah, nothing really, nothing majorly changing. I do think we're, the further we get away from the holidays, the more we should begin to look for that change in the market. In terms of sellers coming back on. This is very, seasonally true, traditionally true, irrespective of the specific economic conditions. When you get into the holidays, people pull their houses off the market, right? Because they don't want to be showing during the holidays. People are focused elsewhere. So you just have a, significant reduction in inventory during that time. And I think that's going to be even more true, that as we move into the spring season here, when people start to, thaw out and start thinking about moving again. I do think there are going to be sellers who kind of pulled back last year because of overall economic conditions, felt like interest rates were high. I do think a lot of those people are going to need to sell now. And so I think we're going to see more inventory come on. I think buyers should pay attention.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, quick mortgage question. We'll go. If you've got an option to go 7 versus 10% down, and it'd be nice to have a little extra cash, but not do that extra, hold on to that 3% on your purchase. Does it make a big difference to get to that 10% mark?
Yeah. So there's several kind of ways to answer that question. In terms of, products you qualify for and pricing and whether mortgage insurance is included and how much that mortgage insurance is included, generally those are impacted at 5% increments. So if you're going to have 7% down versus 10% down, you're looking at a 90% loan to value or a 93% loan to value. The mortgage insurance factor is going to be the same in both of those. Now if you only put 5% down, now the mortgage factor is going to be higher because now you're at a 95% loan to value. But the mortgage insurance factor is going to be the same between 90 and 95. So putting 7 or 10% down isn't really going to change the fundamental. It's going to change the cost, right? Because mortgage insurance is a factor of the loan amount, same as the interest rate. So your payment will be higher if you put less down. But you'd be surprised at how little of an impact that makes on your monthly payment and how important that cash will be. If you're, if we're talking about a purchase transaction, especially if you're a first-time home buyer, if you can afford it, hold on to some cash, because you're probably going to need it. Yeah.
So it doesn't. You said it's impacted. The mortgage insurance factor is impacted in 5% increments.
Typically, yeah.
So like 4 to 5 would be a big difference. 4% to 5% down would make a difference.
Right, because Because
what if it's 5% increments? Wouldn't like 9 to 10 be a big difference as well?
Well, that's a 1% difference. Yeah. So basically, you know, the basic.
But I'm saying you're getting to that 10% mark. Isn't that the next 5%
Yeah.
increment?
Well, we're really kind of approach it from the other end and just loan to value, right? So, you know, if you're at 80% loan to value, you don't have mortgage insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Anywhere between 80 and 85, you're going to have mortgage insurance. But no matter where you fall in that realm, it's going to be the same factor. You know, it's going to be like 0.3 or 0.2, and that's going to be applied to the loan amount and create a rate. But then if your loan to value creeps into the 86% realm, right?
So 5 to 10.
Right. You know, so 5
is the
so
same.
anywhere from 86 to 90 is all going to be the same. And then anywhere from 90 to 95 is all going to be the same. And so you're not fundamentally changing the cost structure by putting 1% more down unless you're going
From
across
10 to
one of
11.
those thresholds. Right.
Okay.
Now, you know, now you're borrowing not 90% but 91%. Well, now you've got a higher factor. So it can impact you that way.
Okay. Great. Got it. Well, yeah, I will kind of kick off the discussion on responsibility here. And I've been thinking about it a little bit. I think the thing that prompted it is, my thought on this topic is that I think this was it. I saw a post from J.P. Dennis.
Oh, yeah.
I
like JP.
saw that one. Yeah.
Shout out, JP.
Shout out J.P.
Good guy.
Um,
And a competitor, by the way.
yeah, still a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, he opened the post, just basically he said something like, it wasn't until I changed my mindset from I can't to how can I, that I think he basically said he started being able to own real estate, and that made a big difference for their family. And I don't know if that, I don't know his whole story. I don't know if that kicked off his career or if that was into his career. But his point was, you know, in the context of real estate, he just kind of assumed he couldn't buy more real estate, invest in real estate. And then he started changing his mindset to how could I, and started looking for solutions. And that made a big difference, that mindset shift. And I've been thinking about it in the context of coaching. A frequent issue that I deal with my soccer guys, which, you know, I have a U13 team, so they're 11 and 12 year olds, and frequent issue is that they show up late sometimes, and it's difficult to figure out how to deal with that when, you know, they're not the ones driving.
Right.
And often, you know, I will always ask them why they were late. And frequently the first thing out of their mouths is, well, my mom wouldn't leave, or my dad didn't show up on time, or something like that. And, you know, I'm sure that, first of all, it's just impossible for me to know, you know, what the real problem or problems were for why it happened. But one thing I can know is that there's something they could have done to at least try, and that the first thing out of their mouth, the first thing on their mind doesn't need to be an excuse or blaming someone else. So I generally try and encourage them to find a way to take responsibility and find a solution for next time. You know, is there something you could do could you ask your dad if you could start leaving 5 minutes earlier or something like that? And so I've been thinking about it in that context of, you know, just learning responsibility and the value of it. But I want to open up a little bit with just your thoughts on what responsibility is. You know, obviously we hear about it all the time, to take responsibility and the value of it. But backing up, what are your thoughts on what is it? What's a good definition of responsibility?
Yeah, that's great. You know, and I actually pulled two different definitions, and we'll come back to that kind of later as to why.
Yeah.
But I pulled the Webster's 1828 dictionary responsibility, definition of responsibility, and I pulled the Webster's Today. And there's a subtle difference there that I think is important. You know, that speaks to a little bit about how our views on that have changed. But in 1828, it's, the definition just says the state of being accountable or answerable as for a trust or office or for a debt. Okay, so that's That's the simple definition of responsibility, Webster's 1828. The modern definition, also Webster's, says the quality or state of being responsible, such as moral, legal, or mental accountability. And there's a subtle difference there that I think is important in explaining some of the ways that we've shifted our understanding of responsibility and our approach to that and the impacts it has on us culturally and business and in many different ways.
Yeah. Okay, I'm kind of tuned out for your definitions. Can you read those again?
Yeah, no problem. So, Webster's 1828, the state of being accountable or answerable as for a trust or office or for a debt. The modern definition, also Webster's, the quality or state of being responsible, such as a moral, legal, or mental accountability.
So what is the distinction you're getting at? I'm curious.
Well, the distinction I'm getting at is, kind of one of your questions that we talked about a little bit is, as the consensus or public view of responsibility changed over the years and how. And I think culturally we've progressively moved further away from assigning moral agency and therefore responsibility to individuals in many ways.
What's the wording?
And I think the wording here is they added mental accountability, right? So we've added this layer, whereas Webster's is more black and white, objective. It's the state of being accountable. Okay? You are accountable, whereas the modern definition adds this kind of layer of mental accountability. That well, not just thinking, but it also relates to kind of mental capacity, and I think that's kind of where I was going with that definition. By adding that sort of idea of mental accountability, we have created the ability to say, well, they're not really accountable because they're not mentally capable of that. There's a sickness, there's a syndrome, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I think, it's easy to think about it. The obvious and current way to think about it is well, it's just harmful to take. There's no benefit in taking responsibility. It's just blame, and it's just a question of who gets the blame. So what's the point of, is there really any value in trying to figure out who's responsible, or are you just figuring out who gets the blame? But obviously, if you really think about it, and you do start to think in terms of responsibility, kind of like JP was talking about there, then you set yourself up for so much more opportunity. If you start thinking, if you don't take responsibility, then you do limit yourself to what everyone around you is doing or what circumstances you're in.
No, I think I absolutely agree. One example, I do think you have to differentiate between blame and responsibility, because everything that you're to blame for, you're responsible for, but not everything you're responsible for are you to blame for, right? So think about one of the illustrations that I've seen for that is like the captain of a naval vessel at sea. If the midshipman in the night watch runs aground, is the captain to blame for that? Well, no. But he's responsible for it, right? He's responsible for the whole ship. So he's accountable and responsible, but he's not really to blame. And I think that's, and I think of it, let's bring it down really narrow and very specific to our business and escrow. One of the ways I think about that to kind of illustrate your point, and I think it goes back to what you were wisely instructing your kids in, is don't think of it in terms of, hey, I have somebody else that I can blame for this, therefore that's the end of my thinking about it.
Right.
In our business, for example, we're responsible to get loan documents to escrow, and then escrow is responsible to sign the borrowers and then to order the wire and make sure the wire gets done. Well, for example, I had two that are supposed to fund here this week, one today, and as of yesterday, escrow had not ordered the wire yet. Well, I'm not directly responsible for that.
Yeah.
Okay, but if that doesn't happen in time, I'm able to influence the outcome in a positive way for my borrowers. And it is my job for my borrowers to make sure that their experience is great and all the parties involved, the realtors and everybody else. And so I have the ability to say, even though it's not my job to make sure that they order the wire on time, I was able to reach out to escrow and say, hey, by the way, did you know you can order that wire today? It'll go out first thing in the morning. You go ahead and get that wire ordered today, so we're not waiting till last minute to do that. So I think that's the positive way that you can take responsibility for things there are responsibilities that exist apart from your actions.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are ways that you can take responsibility. And by taking responsibility, do a better job for whatever constituency you're serving, whether it be your clients or your family or whoever, your team in your case. Take responsibility and do all you can to influence the outcome for good, and that will always inure to your benefit.
Yeah, and I think there's just kind of off the cuff, as I was thinking before, without looking up a definition, the ideas that I came up with for what it is essentially like taking control and authority, taking and acknowledging control and authority over your circumstances, over your surroundings. And I'm sure that's not an exhaustive definition, but I do think there has to be some, first you acknowledge your opportunity to control something, and then there's some level of authority in the sense that, you have to step up. Authority flows to those who step up and take authority, and you have to, step up, and as long as it is something that's going to benefit others around you, then having some foresight to solve problems is everyone's going to be on board with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you provide so much more opportunity both for yourself and for others when I think that's a helpful way of framing it, is just when you think of how can I versus I can't.
Right.
And it's really easy to think in that I can't way not to make everything about coaching, but it's on my mind right now. As a coach, that line becomes really obvious, because I remember thinking as a player, like, I was frustrated with coaches because it was in their control of whether we were doing certain things as a team, or whether certain behavior was tolerated, or what we were doing. And it's easy to stop thinking that way now that I'm in the position of a coach. It is in my control, after we lose a game or after we don't perform. The result isn't necessarily in your control, but the performance is. What did you do in the 2 weeks leading up to it? What behaviors did you address? What things did you talk about? And once you start recognizing those things, you just set yourself up for so much more opportunity, and for people around you too.
Yeah, you bet.
Anything you'd add there?
No, I absolutely agree. It's you asked the question. We talked a little bit earlier about why is it important? Why is responsibility important? I don't know if you were going there next. Anyway, but human responsibility and human flourishing go hand in hand. Chesterton talked about when he was observing kind of the social and governmental instincts to greater and greater authoritarian technocratic control of an economy, of a society, by big government. And he said this is inherently wrong because it denies something inherently or fundamentally inhuman, the responsibility to make moral choices. And I think you see that in the scriptures. It says, "He who spares his son, spares the rod, hates his son, but he who loves them disciplines him promptly." Proverbs 13:24. And then also, "The lazy man buries his hand in the bowl, it wearies him to bring it back to his mouth." Proverbs 26:15. And discipline is a means of assigning responsibility, and responsibility blesses the recipient. It's so important. If we are not held accountable or responsible for our actions, then our actions will invariably deteriorate. The outcomes, and I've definitely seen that. For example, in credit profiles. Again, to bring it kind of really narrowly down, micro into our business, into mortgage, credit profiles almost invariably. When I see someone, everybody's got little dings here and there and things that happen. That's common.
Yeah.
But when you see someone who's just got a credit report full of bad choice, bad performance, consistently bad, it is almost universal that when we're talking, they are not taking personal responsibility for that. They're blaming all kinds of other people. Oh, it's my divorce, my ex-wife, or, there's all manner of excuses that people have. And sure, things happen, and that's normal, but when you have a history accumulated like that, almost invariably, there is a trail of not taking responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard client to take on, because it's very difficult to bring any sort of reform before someone will take personal responsibility. And that's why, discipline is a form of love. It's not a question of, are you going to love someone? The other thing, let's take it broader into culturally. Many cities, you just see able-bodied men begging on every corner in many cities, right? And, who are you loving there? You're not living that individual by subsidizing that effort, because responsibility blesses an individual. Taking responsibility for your way of life, your means of income, blesses that individual. It also blesses society. You're loving society by also requiring all individuals to take responsibility for their actions. It results in a very in a much better cultural environment to live within. When people are taking responsibility.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's kind of a hard mindset to get into if you're not. I mean, even if you are familiar with the idea, or especially if you're just, it's just kind of it's not the way our culture talks a lot of times right now, and so looking for ways to take responsibility of your surroundings and control over them, and it's a hard mindset to get into. But I do think, and I'm not at the point certainly where I have a habit in all areas of asking, how can I, and that's something I'd like to make habitual, and just a way I look at life, because I know, thinking back and just different roles, jobs I've had, jobs I currently have, I frequently frame it in terms of I can't, which means someone else should have, basically. Like, it puts the blame on someone else. And so, I think recognizing that you can frame things that way, and it's helpful to, and then starting to be aware of areas where you're not framing things that way, and you should start to do that. You'll start to see it, and I hope to start to see it, moving on. So helpful discussion. Thanks, Dan.
I want to finish with kind of one final thought is the power of responsibility. Kind of an illustration, and I really want to go to the most profound level. In the scriptures we're told that Christ is head of the church, right? And what did he do? As head of the church, he wasn't to blame for all the blemishes on the church, for the sin and the ugliness of it all, but he took responsibility for it, and he washed it in his own blood, right? And so look at that ultimate act where Christ took responsibility, and what he did was he went in and found a way to clean it up and then present it back to himself as beautiful. And I think that's how we need to think about it in all the details. It kind of goes back to you, to your soccer team, to that first charge to your boys to say, okay, let's change our way of thinking about this, not of whose fault is this, but what can I do to make this situation better than for me, and then for the team, and then for the whole organization. And I think if we approach everything that way, in business and in your family life, and however, how can I act in such a way that regardless of who's to blame, regardless of who's primarily responsible for this, can I act in such a way to improve the situation? And then, like you said earlier, authority flows to those who take that responsibility, because they recognize this, hey, whenever this person steps in, things get better, things go well. And I want things to go well. Everybody wants things to go well, and so that you do end up having that authority flow to you because you take responsibility.
Yeah, it's great. Awesome. Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for listening to Work is Good. If you enjoyed it, share it, leave a review, and listen next week.